to the third lesson in our Lily virtual experience Made to Create. So this lesson is going to be watercolor techniques, and at this point I am not going to keep reminding you what supplies you need. If you go, oh, I don't have that supplies, just pause your video and go and get what you need. It'll work out just great. So in this lesson we're going to learn 8 watercolor techniques. There are so many watercolor techniques. These are kind of the big boys to me. I think if you know these, you can do a lot. So we're going to practice these 8 techniques in 2 different videos. The first video is going to be on 4 different techniques, and I'm going to show you these right now. What you want to do is take your watercolor pad. Now once you see this, pause and write all this in, okay? You're going to evenly divide your pad into 4 quadrants. If you want to use a ruler, you can. I didn't. I just freehanded it. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you will be using we will learn an even wash. You will watch me first and then you will do it. You will learn a technique called wet into wet. You will learn a technique called wet over dry for number 3, and number 4 will be dry brush. Now you can pause your video right now and set that paper up, and I will be right here when you come back. Okay, now the funny thing is we're going to start with number 3 because we want to do wet paint over dry paint, and we have to let that paint really dry well for an effective use of the technique to get it done right. So I'm going to use many different colors, which I'm counting on you to mix up in your palette. Or if you've also chosen to have cakes with you, you can do that too. And I'm going to start with a yellow. Doesn't have to be a yellow. You can do whatever you want. And I'm going to do vertical lines, just 3 in yellow. Clean my brush really well in my clean water. I'm going to try a little bit of blue. Maybe 2 lines here. Now I need to start watching carefully. See how much darker? That's more opaque. That's more transparent. But this is okay for learning a technique. And I'm going to add a red because there's an orangey red, which I grew up with calling that cadmium red. And then there's this more crimson red. Now those are going to dry and I'll come back to them later. Alright, now for the even wash. This is when you get to use this wonderful brush. What a great brush we have, an inch flat brush. And the first thing I'm going to do is just gently wet my paper. I don't want it super wet. I just want it, the paper to be ready. Look what just happened there. It's blooming from this into that. That's okay. That's okay. Now I'm going to, because guess what I can do? I think I'm just going to show you all when you make a mistake or something you don't want on there, not a big mistake. I just take my paper towel and I'll go in and dab most of that up just because I want the effect of the wash. Okay, so now I'm making a wash. I'm going to use my same wonderful flat brush, and I'm going to mix up a nice amount of the crimson red, and all I want to do is to put it on here evenly. So I'm going to work quickly. Now you can see some of where the brush, when I've lifted it, I just want to get it a nice, even, plain wash. Okay, there's your plain wash, which I might do for the sky and then alter some things as I'm working, but I want you to get used to making an even wash. Okay, now this next one is going to kind of remind you of the color wheel, but not really, because there's times we really do want to use 2 different colors but have them blend in the middle. So I'm going to show you using a primary color and a primary color, but in the middle there will be a secondary color, but I don't want it to be a stripe. I want that secondary color to just blend evenly from the primaries, and I want to be able to see the 3 colors. You'll see what I mean. I'm going to demonstrate that right now. Starting with red, and I have to work quickly. I'm going to put red over here. I'm watering it down a little bit, just water right out of the jar. And part of my problem today is I'm outside painting and it's drying really fast. I'm going to put yellow on this side, my beautiful bright yellow. Now quickly I'm going to blend them together before they dry. I should be getting a nice orange, and I am. But I want you to not even see. So here's what I'm doing. I'm dipping my brush in the water, kind of dabbing it on the sponge. I want that to be, you really can't tell where the orange ends and the yellow begins. A little more yellow. Wet into wet. So there we go. You can see red, yellow, and then this orange that is a misty, not linear. I mean, they fused into each other. So that is wet into wet. And now we will end with just a real fun piece, which is the dry brush. Now here's the cool thing about dry brush. Many times for dry brush, people will go and buy a fan brush, which is fun. Go get yourself a fan brush. It's a great, but you don't have to have a fan brush. I'm going to show you a couple of things here. Dry brush, what does that sound like? This brush is wet. I want to dry it off. I'm going to dry off my brush so that the bristles, you can see them. They look like a punk rocker's hairdo. It's all separated with the little bristles. I want to put my paint on those bristles, not pulling the brush back together, but keeping it separate and using that effect with dry brush on my paper. So I'm going to start with a green. My green is kind of thick. And here is what dry brush technique is all about. You see a lot of the white paper. It's like hairs. Think about this. Grass in a meadow. Hairs on an animal. The feeling, sometimes people use these dry brush for the feeling of wind and motion. Now I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to get another color. Now notice, you know what I just did. I wet my brush. So I'm going to take my paper towel and dry my brush again. And this time I'm going to try some red. And I'm just going to see, it's different. It's much wetter, but it's still, the bristles are separated. Let's see what happens. Oh, there it comes. You can see the dry part. Let me dry that off a little bit. I'm going to, oh, that works. So I have not dry brush here. I have a stroke. I just dried my brush off and I'm brushing the paint away from that stroke, and I'm getting those hair-like separated qualities of dry brush. So what I'd like you to do is do this square in dry brush. The goal being you can see streaks of white underneath your streaks of color because of the hairs of the brush. You've just tried a even wash, wet into wet, wet over dry. So now this is dry, and I'm going to take my colors over this dry paint, and this is so much fun as we watch the transparency of yellow wet over dry. Look what happens. There's green where it's blue, there's orange where it's red. Just fantastic. Now I'm going to mix up a purple, which is red and blue. And I'm going to add that on top. Get that more transparent by adding more water to my pigment. Yes. So the beauty of this is you see the purple and the white spaces and the yellow, purple over yellow, which is a complementary color. We'll talk about that later. Is kind of a brown. The purple over red is kind of a more red purple. Just beautiful colors there. So now let me try now the blue. And maybe make sure it's good and transparent. Yes, I'm adding more water to my blue on my palette. Okay, there we go. Beautiful. Look, there's even a green where I went over that. And just for fun, I'm going to take a red. Such a strong color is red, and I'm going to paint right over that. So look what it does. Wonderful effect. You can see the colors between. It gives you almost a plaid-like effect, but this is actually glazing. When you put a wet color over a dry color, and you come up with a new and unique color that you can see, because you can see both of them at the same time. Layering colors or layering paint is glazing. So there are our first techniques. Join me for the second video for our second techniques.